They were so young. When I'd first started my little pet project, laying Boulder's ghosts to rest, I had tried to do research on each of them beforehand. I had plenty of free time, so I'd spend hours at the library combing through ancient newspapers to find out who they were and how each one had died. After a few weeks, though, I had to admit to myself that it didn't really matter, and that reading through so much death and horror wasn't particularly good for me. I'd decided to just focus on laying the ghosts. I may not have known these remnants' names, but their cause of death was pretty obvious just from watching their loop. Both of them had their heads down, focusing on chasing something into the street, a ball or maybe a small dog. Whatever it was, it hadn't left a psychic imprint behind, so I couldn't see it. The figures ran laughing into the middle of the road, and then the moment I'd dreaded arrived. The freckled girl turned her head in my direction, a look of horror materializing on her face just before she blinked out. Her friend never looked up. She disappeared before she even noticed the vehicle bearing down on them. I closed my eyes, reminding myself that the two girls were gone, and had been for a long time. In a few seconds, the whole scene would start over. My working theory was that every ghost was a small piece of someone's soul trapped on this side after death. Remnants like these two were the least sentient of the ghosts I'd encountered, but their presence still bothered me in more ways than one. Luckily, I could do something about it. Other witches often referred to boundary magic, my personal specialty, as death magic, and they hated those of us who could use it. But I tried to think of what I could do in terms of bridges, messages, reunions. I could put these ghosts to rest by sending the fractured parts of their souls across the boundary between life and death, where I assumed their spirits would become whole again. At least, that's what I thought happened. I was still fairly new to this and was making it up as I went along. I unfolded my legs and crouched down a foot from the street's center line, digging my big Swiss Army knife out of the backpack. I tried to pull out a cutting blade, but I kept fumbling it. We had done this routine 100 times in the last 6 months, but now it was early December, and my fingers were stiff with cold. I mumbled a few choice curse words, which steamed in the freezing air and drifted away. I blew on my fingers and rubbed them together until they were warm enough to work. When I finally got the blade out, I checked my hand and found the most recent scar was on my right pinky. Tensing, I pricked my ring finger. I'd gotten a lot of practice at poking just hard enough for the amount of blood I needed. The moment my blood hit the cold night air, the two girls paused, finally breaking their loop. There was boundary magic in my blood, and ghosts could somehow sense that. They didn't move any closer, but their laughing faces went slack and they turned their heads toward me, regarding me like a particularly sweet and tempting treat. This part never failed to unnerve me, and my uninjured hand automatically reached up to touch my birth mother's bloodstone where it hung on a leather cord under my clothes. Still in the crouch, I turned in a circle, smearing the blood in a dark line that looked almost blue in the yellowish streetlights. I wanted to move as quickly as possible to get those lifeless, staring eyes off me, but I forced myself to take care. The circle had to be completely intact, or I'd have to do this all over again. I spent a few seconds filling in spots where the blood had smeared. There weren't any bad cracks in the road. I'd chosen this spot because it was the smoothest. When I was confident the circle would hold, I carefully stepped outside it. The Band-Aid was already in the outer pocket of my coat, and I taped it onto my bleeding finger. Then I looked up at the watchful girls. The first time I'd made a doorway to the other side, it was almost an accident. Well, Simon referred to it as psychic self-defense, and maybe that was a better description. My biological father, Lysander, had been attacking me with ghosts, something I hadn't even known was possible until that moment. Desperate and with no other ideas, I'd done this same procedure more or less on instinct. I think I was even more surprised than Lysander when it worked. Now I squatted back down, still outside the circle, and pressed my palms into the asphalt so the tips of my tattoos just touched the line of blood. Lily had designed the elaborate griffin tattoos, which helped me channel magic with